Chapter 27. This is fluid, electrolytes, and acid-base balance. And again, this is a continuation of the urinary system because all of this is controlled by the urinary system. So we're going to talk about fluid and electrolytes, the balance, input and output, the acid-base balance, the different types of fluids, the contents of each one of these fluids, including the ions, pH and its regulation, electrolytes, and so on. So water, since we're talking about fluid, water is about 99% of the fluids in the body. The rest, the 1%, is everything else. And extracellular fluid is any fluid outside of the cells. What's the fluid that's outside of the cells? Is it the blood? Is the blood inside the cells? It is outside. So this is extracellular. How about in between the cells? It's interstitial, so but it's still outside of the cells, right? How about the lymph? How about cerebrospinal fluid? How about everything else not inside the cells? Yes, it's intracellular and extracellular. Intracellular is inside the cells, extracellular is everywhere else, as long as it is not um, inside the cells. That's what we call it. So we have the fluid balance, electrolyte balance, and acid-base balance. Fluoride balance. When you see balance, automatically it means input and output. How much do you gain? How much do you lose? It should be equal, right? You drink 2 liters, you get rid of 2 liters. This is for the water. You get 15 milligram of sodium, you get rid of 15 milligrams of sodium. So this is always the balance. For the fluids, it's mainly the water gain should be equal to the water loss. And how do we lose it? There are different ways, but the most important way of losing water is urine and stool, right? Is that it? No, there are other things. Okay, there is the sweat, there is the vapor, and so on. There are different ways. Electrolytes, same thing. The amount of these inorganic compounds or ions, I mean, electrolytes are ions. Remember this. Electrolytes are ions like sodium, potassium, calcium, whatever. These are all ions come from inorganic compounds. Like, how do we get sodium and how we get chloride? From sodium chloride. Sodium chloride is inorganic compound, isn't it? What are the organic compounds? They should contain a glucose is one of them, but it should contain carbon and hydrogen, right? So sodium chloride, does it have that? It's inorganic. All of them are inorganic. Whatever gives you ions, when it dissociate and give you ions, we call it inorganic compounds. And these electrolytes, what did you call it electrolytes? It's ions. Okay, why did you call it electrolytes? Like sodium. Is a sodium positive or negative? Positive. It is positive. How about potassium? Positive. So it is ions. Ions, the difference between ion and atom is the ion has a charge. Do we remember that? It can be positive, it can be negative. Okay, so it does have a charge. Since it has a charge, this allows electricity to move down the fluid, and that's why we called it electrolytes. Electrolyte, it conduct electricity. This is where the name came from. So if you're talking about water, if you like put a wire, electrical wire in the water and put your finger, you will be electrified, right? Not because of the water, it's because of the electrolytes in the water. And there is no water that's like have zero electrolytes. So what actually conduct electricity is electrolytes. And the balance of that is the same thing. It's the balance between gain and loss. We gain electrolytes, we lose electrolytes. It should be equal. And we lose it the same way almost as water. Acid-base balance, I think we already know that the normal pH of the blood is 7.35 to 7.45, right? It should be somewhere in between. Anything in between is okay. Okay? It's always a range. And it is a balance between hydrogen and OH. We talked about this, right? Hydrogen, OH. Hydrogen is acidity. OH, alkalinity, right? You add more hydrogen, you move to acidity. Less hydrogen, you move to alkalinity or increase OH. Same thing, isn't it? So we have different ways of gaining and losing H and OH. And using those, we are going to control the pH, which we call it acid-base balance, including different things that we have. We have different tools in our body, including the lung, respiratory system, the kidney, uh, and other things in like in the blood. Amount or the percentage of water in males is different than females. Okay, in males, 60% of the body is water. In females, it's 50. Half of your body, if you're a female, half of your body is water. Our body as males is 60%. Remember this. This is the water, intracellular and extracellular. Extracellular is interstitial fluid, which is in between the cells, plasma, which is in the blood vessels, blood, and others like lymph and cerebrospinal fluids and the fluid like in the joints and these tiny, even though there is some fluid in your eyes. Remember the aqueous humor? So we do have it in different parts, and but this is the tiny part. The large part is intracellular and extracellular. Extracellular is interstitial and plasma. This is the main thing. And there are other things in the body fluids, including the different types of organic molecules and minerals and so on. So look at this. This is the male. Look at this water, 60% versus 50%. Okay. And it is interstitial. So if this is 60%, the 60% is divided as intracellular, 33, interstitial followed by interstitial followed by the plasma, and the least, like 1% or less, is others, all others together. Even if you don't remember these percentages, but you have to remember that 60% versus 40%, 60-40 in males, 50-50 in females. Is that clear? Number two, you have to remember that intracellular is the major part, followed by interstitial, which is extracellular, interstitial, plasma, others. Okay, like those two are very close to each other if you add these, but it goes like intracellular, extracellular, and extracellular is interstitial, plasma, followed by others. That's males and females, same thing. So intracellular is the cytosol. What's the difference between cytosol and cytoplasm? Is what? Both of them are the inside of the cells. What's the difference? Yes. Cytosol is the fluid only. Cytoplasm is everything, fluid and organelles. And extracellular, including interstitial fluids and different types of fluid, blood, and so on. If you are talking about others, which is like 1%, lymph, cerebrospinal fluid, synovial fluid. Where is the synovial fluid? In synovial joints, right? We have fluid in the joints. Some serous fluids, like very tiny amount in the pleura, in the pleural space, in the precordial space, peritoneal space. You have something in the water, perilymph and endolymph. But you still need to know these minor components. So this is for the water. For the ions, extracellular and intracellular, we have all types of ions. But what I want you to remember, what is more in the extracellular than intracellular? And what's more intracellular than extracellular? Okay. Sodium chloride bicarb. Is that outside only? No, it's outside and inside. But which one is more? Outside. These are outside more. How about inside? Potassium, magnesium, phosphates, and negatively charged proteins. Do you mean that we don't have potassium outside? Do we have potassium outside or not? Yes. What I'm saying is which one is more? Which one? I didn't say which one is yes and which one is no. No. Everything is everywhere. You have all of those. All what you see here is both extracellular and intracellular. It's all over. But the question is which one is more outside than inside? Sodium chloride bicarb is more outside, extracellular. Out of those, the most important that you cannot forget, sodium and potassium. You cannot forget this. Sodium is the main extracellular what? Cation or anion? Cation. And potassium is the main intracellular cation, right? Anion, chloride, bicarb outside, magnesium and phosphate inside. But even if you forgot one, you should remember. But even if you forgot, most important is sodium and potassium. So here are the main things, but what I told you is the most important. Osmotic concentration of the extracellular and intracellular, it's very close. The osmotic concentration is very close. And the thing with the osmotic concentration is it allow for osmosis. Do you remember the osmosis? The movement of water from low to high osmotic pressure, right? Ion exchange. Do we exchange ions between the intracellular and extracellular? Of course. Do you guys remember that action potential when the sodium moves in and potassium moves out? So we do have that exchange. Different ways, which is osmosis. Osmosis is specifically for water. And there is diffusion and carrier mediated transport. Solutes that are available in the extracellular fluid are electrolytes is both in and out. Proteins is mainly extracellular. Nutrients, same thing. Waste products, same thing. So these three are mainly extracellular. Hormones that affect fluid and electrolyte balance. We talked about this several times. Do you still remember? I told you before, you will see it over and over and over again, right? Antidiuretic hormone, what's the function? Reabsorption of water, right? Reabsorption of water. Which part of the nephron that the that ADH control the reabsorption of water? Mainly the distal convoluted tubule. Okay. How about the aldosterone function? Reabsorption of sodium. Which part of the nephron? Mainly distal. There is part of the collecting, by the way, but mainly distal, followed by collecting a little bit. How about the natriuretic peptide? What does it do? Does it reabsorb something or get rid of something? Get rid of sodium. The name gave it away, if you understand it. Natriuretic. Sodium in the urine. So here is ADH, reabsorption of water. But where do we make and where do we store the ADH? Hypothalamus is where we make it. And where do we store it? Posterior pituitary. Right. And who tell the posterior pituitary to release it? ADH. If the osmotic pressure goes up or down. Think about it. If it goes down, it means it's diluted. Do you still need to add more water to the diluted fluids? No. So if the osmotic pressure goes up, do you get the osmotic pressure? Osmotic pressure means it's more viscous, it's more concentrated, it contains more solutes. Did you get the idea? Exactly like the difference between honey and juice. Which one is higher osmotic pressure? Honey or juice? Honey. This is a very clear example that you cannot forget. If you forgot it, honey is more viscous and higher osmotic pressure than the juice, and the juice is higher osmotic pressure than the water, right? And so on. So, um, what trigger the ADH release is osmotic pressure goes up or down? Which one? Up. If it goes up, osmotic pressure goes up, hypothalamus, pituitary, releasing the ADH. So it monitors the osmotic concentration of the extracellular fluid. And then there are also uh, monitors like in the hypothalamus that also detect the osmotic pressure or osmotic concentration uh, of uh, of the cerebrospinal fluid as well. If it goes up, osmotic pressure, release ADH, reabsorb water, diluting and returning osmotic pressure back to normal. Clear? Aldosterone, reabsorption of what? Sodium. What happened automatically when you reabsorb sodium? You secrete potassium. Do you still remember that? If you reabsorb sodium, you have to. You cannot keep the enemies. You reabsorb sodium, you get rid of potassium automatically. And what is the follower of sodium? Yes, but there's one before that. Chloride, followed by water and bicarb. Sodium chloride, water bicarb. Sodium chloride, water bicarb. Then what follow potassium? Hydrogen. Yes, hydrogen. You cannot forget this. I repeated it so many times to remember it. Okay? Sodium followed by chloride, water, bicarb. How about potassium? Hydrogen. This is like follower. Okay? This is like your shadow. Potassium moves this way, its shadow is going to move automatically. Can you move without your shadow? This is the shadow. Potassium moves in, its shadow moves in, which is hydrogen. Potassium moves out, hydrogen moves out. Same thing for sodium. Sodium moves in, chloride, water, and bicarb moves in. Sodium moves out, all of it will go out, like a group together. Natriuretic peptides, several times we repeated that. Natriuretic, sodium in the urine. So it is sodium secretion. And when you get rid of sodium, you get rid of chloride and you get rid of water, right? So which is the opposite of ADH, isn't it? It's the opposite of ADH and aldosterone, especially aldosterone. So it's called what? Natriuretic. Uretic. Sodium in the urine. Do you make more urine or less urine? More. Why? Because sodium go to the urine, followed by followed by water. Isn't that more urine? Yes. So it's called diuresis. This is called diuresis. You make a lot of urine. Okay. Where do we gain water, and how do we gain and how do we lose water? Gain about 2.5 liters per day is what we need. And you get that from drinking. Of course, this is an average. About 1200 milliliters in drinking. Eating will give you about a liter. Yes, anything, most of the stuff that we eat contain water, right? whatever you eat, cheese, vegetables, fruits, these will all contain water, right? So this is the main thing. And a little bit come from metabolic generation, or we call it the metabolic water. Does anybody remember the metabolic water? Do you remember glucose, glycolysis? Anybody remember this? Glycolysis, and then tricarboxylic acid, electron transport chain. At the end, you make water and energy and hydrogen. Do you remember this? So you make what? Water. You make water. Yes, it's a little bit. Yes, but it does count. Okay. So mainly drinking, followed by eating, followed by metabolic water. Do we make the metabolic water in the cytoplasm or in the mitochondria? Mitochondria, because it comes from which part? Is it glycolysis, tricarboxylic acid, or oxidative phosphorylation, which is the third one, electron transport chain? It's the last one, oxidative phosphorylation. Where do we lose it? How much should we lose? We gain 2.5 liters. How much should we lose? 2.5 liters. And we call that water balance, right? How do you lose it? Urine, feces, and tiny amount insensible perspiration. Insensible perspiration. What's insensible perspiration? Insensible perspiration is insensible. You don't feel it. When you secrete sweat, you feel it. Can you tell if you're sweating or not? You can. But this water, there is some water like this from under the skin, very slowly squeeze itself in between the cells until it go to the surface. How can you feel it? It's very tiny amount and just squeeze itself slowly. You don't feel it. So this part that's released in between the cells until you get rid of it is insensible. Sensible is sweat. Okay, SS, sensible sweat, sensible sweat. So here it is, 2.5 and 2.5. Drinking is 1.2, and urination is 1.2. That will make it easier. Drinking in, urination out, same amount on average. And then about a liter in the foods and zero point 0.3 liters for metabolic water. And then urination followed by skin, lung, feces. Feces is not the major one. It's the minor one. Okay, because feces is mainly solid and just a little bit of water. So this sequence is important to know. Urine followed by evaporation, and then lung, and then feces is the minimal one. Here is the metabolic water that we were talking about in the mitochondria, oxidative phosphorylation. It gives you the metabolic water, and then the rest will come from food and drink. Otherwise, and this is the N, and then you lose the same amount through urine, evaporation, breathing, and stool or feces. Water moves in between intracellular and extracellular almost freely. Why? Because remember that membrane, the cell membrane? The cell membrane have water channels that allow water to move in and out via concentration gradient. Clear? If the extracellular fluid is higher osmotic, water moves out or in. If the extracellular fluid higher concentration, higher osmotic, water moves in or out. In, does the water move from low to high or from high to low? I'm talking about osmotic pressure. Low to high, low to high. So it moves out. If outside, do you guys remember in 233 when we put this red blood cell in a fluid and it can either shrink or swell and rupture, right? So it's the water moves from low osmotic to high osmotic. Okay, you forget it. Okay, the water move from the juice to the honey. Is that easier? Water move from juice to honey. Okay? If I have honey here and juice here and a membrane in between, the water will go from juice to honey. Remember it this way. Okay? So if I have extracellular fluid containing higher osmotic pressure, the water moves out. If the intracellular pressure is higher, water moves in. And this is how water moves in and out. Now, how the fluid moves like from the blood to the interstitial fluid. I think we talked about this. Do you guys still remember? Hydrostatic pressure across the capillary wall, leaving the blood, going in between the cells. How does it move? Hydrostatic pressure, is that favor out or in? Out in the arteriolar side, right? Out. And oncotic is in. Which one overcome the other in the arterial side? Net hydrostatic or net oncotic? Net hydrostatic. So the water moves out to the cells, from the blood to the cells. Clear? And the other side, the venous side, the venular side, osmotic is higher than the net osmotic, higher than the net hydrostatic. So the water moves into the blood, right? All of it, like whatever left, equal to whatever goes back? No. The difference goes back as lymph. Yes, goes back as lymph. Intracellular fluid is what's inside the cells. Extracellular fluid is everywhere else, but 80% of it is interstitial fluid and minor components, and 20% is in the blood, which is plasma. So remember this again. Water leave capillaries from the arteriolar side. Clear? It go back from the venular side, right? All of it? Not all of it. Part of it stay, right? 10 milliliters leave, 7 or 8 go back. What happened to the rest? Go to the lymph. So if fluid accumulated in between the cells, we call that edema. And we talked about this before. Do you remember? What's edema? Accumulation of excessive interstitial fluid, specifically. Interstitial fluid, right? This is edema. If it is due to an issue in the lymphatics, we call it lymphedema. Do you still remember that? So again, fluid moves according to the osmotic pressure. It moves from hypotonic to hypertonic. We're talking about water here. Dehydration. What's D? D means low. So dehydration is low water, right? Dehydration. If dehydration occur, it means the balance does not exist anymore, right? It's no more balanced. We're supposed to gain 2.5 and lose 2.5. Is that right? What if you don't drink much water? You'll still lose the 2.5. So you get dehydrated, right? With dehydration, do you think the osmotic pressure goes up or down? Up. Yes, because you are dehydrated. You're supposed to gain 2.5, lose 2.5. You're gaining 2. You're getting dehydrated. Your blood gets higher osmotic pressure. Is that clear? What should we do now? This higher osmotic pressure stimulates the release of ADH. We reabsorb water and dilute it back, right? But this is temporarily until you drink. But here is the question. If you are dehydrated, and follow with me, it's all understanding. If you are dehydrated, do you think the water move from the cells out to the extracellular, to the blood, or it moves into the cells if you're dehydrated? Out of the cells. Why? Where? Yes. because when you are dehydrated, osmotic pressure in the blood, which is extracellular, get higher, isn't it? Do you get it or not? Right? Osmotic pressure increase. If osmotic pressure increase outside of the cells, the water moves out. Is that clear? Is that clear? Say no if it's not clear. If you are dehydrated, it means less water. Anything else change? No, just less water. Same amount of solute in less water. Isn't that more concentrated? Higher concentration, higher osmotic pressure. So the fluid is going, or the water is going to leave the cells and go out. So the cells itself become dehydrated, which is an issue because fluid is essential inside the cells. Everything, everything in the cells happen in that water medium, which is the cytosol. You have to have it. So the cells start to shrink and start to have issues. Now, how can we get uh, dehydration? Either, what do you think? Dehydration, is it less input or more input? Less input, like you're not drinking, right? Not drinking or not eating, the fluid in or the gain is low. Or higher loss. Isn't it both of them make dehydration, right? It's either 2.5, 2.5. That's balance. 2 in or gain versus 2.5. Dehydration, right? Which is imbalance. How about this? 2.5 and 3. You lose 3, still dehydration. How can that happen? Vomiting or diarrhea. Vomiting, you lose the contents by vomiting, right? From the stomach out. Diarrhea, you lose from the colon, right? From the digestive system. You lose it out. In both cases, it's watery fluid, so you're losing water. Um, you're not drinking enough water or excessive perspiration. Like, what do you think happened to you if you are in a hot weather and you have to like walk in the desert or something? Are you getting sweating, right? And you're not getting enough water at the same time. So whatever it is, low gain or more loss, in both cases, it causes dehydration. And these are the different scenarios. Either you're sweating too much, you're not drinking much, vomiting, diarrhea. In all cases, osmotic pressure goes up or down. Up. ADH is released, right? The reabsorption of water. What else? When you get dehydrated, what do you think happened to the volume of the blood? Does it stay the same or increase or decrease? Decrease. Less water go to the kidney, isn't it? What's the kidney's response? What's the kidney is going to do? If less blood go to it, it's going to respond by releasing something. What is that something? Renin. Renin, yes. So it's going to release renin, and renin is going to do what? Convert angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. And angiotensin 1 will be converted to angiotensin 2. What converted? ACE or angiotensin converting enzyme. Do we all remember this? And what's the functions? Functions 4 of angiotensin 2. Vasoconstriction, thirsty, ADH, aldosterone 4, right? And all of that, when you feel thirsty, you drink water, you compensate, right? And everything else is going to compensate for the low blood pressure. The opposite of dehydration is over or hyperhydration. Exactly the opposite. What is it? Is it more gain than loss or more loss than gain? Overhydration. More gain than loss. How does that happen? Yes. Oh, how about this? You drinking a lot the whole day long. Yes, this is overhydration, right? Or you're not making enough urine. You're not sweating. You're not losing enough. And if that's the case, what do you think will happen to the osmotic pressure of the blood? Increase or decrease? Decrease now. Decrease, right? And when it decrease, will the water move from extracellular to intracellular or the opposite? From to extra to intra, right? And the cells become swollen. When the cells are swelling and filled with water, is that something good? Anything unusual is bad. So what actually happened? Everything is diluted inside. It's not supposed to be diluted. This is not a good medium for it. You're supposed to have enough water. Too much is bad, too low is bad. Because the cells are going to be distended, filled with water. Everything inside will be diluted, and this will include even the functions of like enzymes. For the enzymes to work, you have to have normal osmotic pressure. Everything work in normal osmotic pressure. Enzymes, hormones, everything. So you can be like for hyperhydration or over and hyper, same, right? Overhydration, hyperhydration. You can be drinking more water. How about if you're in a hospital and they give you the saline? It goes into your blood. The kidney is not losing enough. Chronic renal failure is not working fine. Heart, liver failure. All of this will lead to retaining fluid, or you're releasing too much ADH. All of this is going to lead to hyperhydration or overhydration.